Okay, people, as promised, here we go with the first of four political economic systems, classic liberalism. We're going to do this one first because for a number of reasons. One, the U.S. falls into classic liberalism, as does the UK, United Kingdom, and some other places. But we're going to use the U.S. as an example here, because for obvious reasons. Okay, that's one. The other one is the other political systems are generally alternatives to or reactions against classic liberalism. So, in a sense, they all kind of gang up on classic liberalism. So we'll have running through this and running through the chapter that you've read already. You see kind of this liberalism versus everything else juxtaposition. And so it makes some sense, especially since, as the book describes, historically, there's been a strong move towards liberalism over the last 30 or 40 years. We're now seeing reactions against that in a lot of different countries, but generally over the last 30, 40, 50 years, countries have become much more liberal, although not that many of them would qualify as classically liberal. But generally they have moved in that direction. We're going to put them in categories just to kind of illustrate the ideas, but whether or not a country is classically liberal or social democracy or somewhere in between is totally debatable. All right, I'm going to put some in categories and explain why I'm putting those in those categories and not other countries. All right, so classic liberalism stems from the idea that freedom is an inherent good and that providing individuals freedom creates the best of all possible systems. How? When you free up individuals to trade with each other, to make bargains with each other, to make contracts with each other, then you're ultimately creating more wealth. Growth is an enormous part of the fundamental logic of classic liberalism. Classic liberalism, freedom, economic freedom, leads to growth. And what's growth? Well, growth essentially, when it comes down to it, is wealth creation. So, the more wealth you create, the better it is for everybody, even if you're not very well off, even if you're poor. You're going to be in a better situation, and you have more chances, you have more opportunities in a country with solid, steady growth, in a country with solid, steady wealth creation. You shouldn't mess with, governments shouldn't mess with markets because governments, the public sector is worse, more efficient at making economic decisions than the market itself, than the individuals, those millions of individuals, billions of individuals who make up a market. That's the basic logic. We got the United States and the UK in here. We've talked about how these economic systems are different in terms of what they provide, in terms of how much they're regulated. The US is generally going to see less regulations than other countries. They're generally going to be a little bit lower taxation than some of these other categories of governments we'll look at. They're going to provide fewer public goods than other systems. We're seeing this debate play out now in this election with the Democratic nomination. You had an ongoing, in the lead up before Joe Biden got the nomination, one of the big arguments was, how much is the United States going to move away from that classic liberalism towards something else? Okay, towards more public goods, higher taxes, more regulations. Okay, more equality. Because the Achilles heel of classic liberalism is inequality. Classic liberal will tell you you don't want full equality. You can't get it. Even in the Soviet Union, and there's still inequality. It just looked a little bit different than it does here. You can't get it. And you really shouldn't want it. Inequality, in an, when some people have more than others, there's incentive to change. There's incentive to work. Incentive to work to maintain that wealth. More importantly, incentive to work to create wealth if you don't have it. So those are basic arguments behind classic liberalism. Later on, we're going to take some issues to examine them. But the final point here is that on that freedom versus equality question, a classic liberal approach will be one that maximizes freedom and doesn't worry so much about equality. All right. See you for political economic systems number 2, social democracy.